Let's talk about drill bits. But before we talk about sharpening them, let's make sure that we know what the names of the parts are. So this part down here is called the shank. The hollow part that appears to be cut away in this spiral motion here, that's called the flute. The part opposite to the flute is called the land. And then when we look at the tip of the drill bit, this is the cutting edge or the cutting tip of the drill bit. One common question is, what angle does the cutting edge of my drill bit need to be cut at? So drill bits come in a variety of angles, and if we sort of extend our cutting edges over, the angles that it comes in from here to here is generally anywhere from 118 degrees all the way to 135 degrees. But that's kind of tough to visualize, and it doesn't really tell me what this angle needs to be. So if I imagine that there is a straight line across here, I know that these areas then are going to be 180 degrees. Take away that amount and then divide it by 2, because I need to have some part on this side and some part on this side. So when I do that math, what that tells me is that these areas in here are going to be roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of about 22.5 degrees all the way up to 31 degrees. So when we're thinking about it, the easiest way to think about it is they need to be approximately 30 degrees, but if we think about them being 30 degrees, maybe we'll be 30 degrees or a little bit under. So when we're sharpening a drill bit, one thing that we need to remember is that we're going to sharpen one cutting edge at a time. So I'll just highlight the cutting edge so you can see. So I'm going to sharpen this cutting edge first. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to take that cutting edge, I'm going to have my fingers resting on the tool rest, and I'm going to contact the wheel so that that cutting edge is square against the wheel. And then as it starts grinding, I'm going to move it up the wheel just a little bit and even slightly rotate maybe just a little bit as I go. And just like in math, because we're doing one cutting edge at a time, what I do to one cutting edge, I have to do to the other cutting edge, just to make sure that everything stays even. So here we go. I have my cutting edge that I'm working on cutting. I'm going to start with it so it's 90 degrees to the wheel. Contact and lift up. I'll do 1, 2, 3. So you can see now that I've started to establish a slightly more sharp cutting edge. You kind of see there. So now I got to do the other side. So start at 90. Up and rotate just a little bit. Start at 90. Up and rotate a little bit. And now I can inspect and see how I've done. I've got a little bit more sharpening to do. I'm going to sharpen, I'm going to clean these up just a little bit more, and then we'll do a quick inspection. All right, so what am I looking for? Well, when I look this way, I want to make sure that the distance across, kind of like the chisel tip of the drill bit, I want to make sure that the distance across there is equal, so it doesn't look like one cutting edge is sticking out a little bit further than the other cutting edge. The other thing that I'm looking for is that area that I've ground. I want that area to start, its highest point needs to be right here, and then it's going to work its way down the drill bit. So I have to double check to make sure that that has happened as well. What I don't want to have happen is I don't want to have the cutting edge be here, and then I can see the ground edge down here sort of forming an arc like this, because this cutting edge needs to be the furthest point towards the tip of the edge that I just ground. So we can take a look at that, and I can see that I'm looking fairly even. And now when I take a look at the actual edge that I've cut, I want to make sure that that edge is a new keen ground cutting edge. So on this side as well as on this side. So it looks like I did pretty good. Of course, big drill bits are a little bit easier than small drill bits. And what would have happened if I over-rotated as I ground this is I would actually start to contact the opposite cutting edge. So if I wanted to grind this edge and I started on the wheel and I rotated a little bit too far, I would actually start nicking this edge. And you will see that if you grind either too far or you twist too much. You'll look at one side and it'll look good. You'll see that the cutting edge looks really good on it. But if you flip it over to the other side, you'll see that the cutting edge is maybe good here, but over here, you've actually contacted that cutting edge and you've kind of rounded it over. So that's what you're looking for. Remember, start with the cutting edge square to the wheel, then you lift up and turn just slightly as you're grinding that cutting edge. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So I like to count how much I do on one side and count how much I do on the other side. And then when we're done, we take a look to see if this area is even, and we take a look to see if the cutting edge that we've ground is keen all the way along, and that the area between the drill bit and that ground area forms an angle that goes down. It doesn't have a hump that comes back down around on it. Another thing to note that's kind of tough to see, if we imagine that this is the grinding wheel that's going this way, and here is my tool rest. One thing I talked about was making sure that when you started your drill bit, you started it at a 90-degree angle. And what does that actually mean? Well, there's a fancy term for this. And in mathematics, when we're talking about something that's perfectly 90 to a radius, it's called tangent. But we're just going to say 90 degrees. So when you stick your drill bit into the wheel, remember that you either want to stick it at like a perfect 90, or even maybe just down just a little bit, and then you can move it up the wheel and twist just a little bit as you're rotating. And the idea there is that's helping you make sure that the line that you've ground will be continuously down sloping. If I started down like this and then worked my way up the wheel, what you're going to have a tendency to do is have a drill bit that looks like that in the end. So when it's time to inspect your work, here are the things that you're looking for. Of course, the first thing you're looking for is this cutting edge is keen, meaning that you've ground all the way to the end of this cutting edge. But you're also then looking to make sure that if this is sort of the ground surface right in here, you're looking to make sure that this angle continually goes down. What you don't want it to look like is this, where we have our cutting edge right here, and this is the area that's ground, but the area that's ground shows you that this cutting edge is a little bit lower than it is right up there. So that line, instead of continually going down, actually goes up even just a little bit. That's going to cause problems when you are going to use the drill bit. Now, the other thing that you're looking for when it's time to inspect, of course, is that you have that required angle of somewhere in the neighborhood of 22.5 degrees. up to maybe 31 degrees. I like to think of it 30 degrees short or 30 degrees or less. But what you're looking for when you twist the drill bit so that one cutting edge is right off to the side and the other one is exactly opposite, you want to make sure that the center of the drill bit is actually in the tip, that these angles here are the same. And the distance from this sort of imaginary plane down to here and this imaginary plane down to here are the same. What you don't want it to look like is this, where you have that imaginary line there, but the center of the drill bit is right there. And what that'll often result in is the distance from here to here will be greater than from here to here. Or the angle might be a little bit sharper on one side than on the other side. A drill bit like this is going to wander on you.